So hello everybody, my name is Mark Sage. I'm the Executive Director of the area, Augmented Reality Enterprise Alliance. And welcome to the latest of a number of masterclass WorkinAR webinar sessions we've been running. And I'm really excited to have the team from Apprentice and Angelo, the CEO and founder, talking about how AR is changing the life sciences industry. So I put my teeth back in. Just a quick introduction about the area for those who don't know. Angelo, next slide, please. So a reminder for many of you, I guess the area is the only global membership-funded not-for-profit alliance dedicated to accelerating the adoption of enterprise AR. And we do that by supporting the growth of a comprehensive ecosystem and delivering that kind of thought leadership of one of these. The webinar today is an example of that. Next slide, please. Our membership continues to grow, and they're basically in three different segments. There are the enterprises that are deploying the technology, and we see they're across all sorts of different industries using all sorts of different use cases. We have a bigger group of the providers of the technology, ranging from the hardware providers that many of you would know to the software providers, including Apprentice, who are here today. And then our third group are non-commercial organizations. So we have government agencies, research institutes, universities, and standards organizations, and kind of together bring that really interesting insight and kind of future part on top of the work that we're doing to help deliver AR now. Next slide, please. What we do, the area focuses on four what we call our strategic pillars. The first one is about delivering thought leadership. It's about the kind of information that business decision makers need to help them invest and understand AR. And we boil that down to four simple tasks. One is explaining the different problems that can be solved, so the use cases, showing examples of those problems being solved in real life, the case studies, and we're going to see some examples of that today. What technologies are needed, and most importantly, the ROI, the return on investment. And we actually have a whole bunch of information and a calculator that's available on the area website. The second pillar is around networking, about bringing the ecosystem together to share those experiences, to learn from each other, to make sure that companies, sometimes don't make the same mistakes or learn from other companies' challenges of deploying the technology and also the benefits. The third, around the educate, is making sure we have a steady set of skilled workers coming into the industry. So that's very much on helping connect organizations with universities, doing guest lecturing, outplacements, anything like that, which is really important. And then finally, about reducing barriers to adoption. And we have a number of committees that meet on a monthly basis, looking at some of the barriers, including safety, security, human factors, research, and developing a global set of requirements. Next slide, please, Angelo. What we try to do, obviously, we haven't been able to meet together. We do run an annual workshop, which have been very well attended and really exciting in the last few years, but obviously with the COVID restrictions, we haven't been able to do that. So we've created this WorkinAR series. What we're trying to do is bring new people or companies new to AR and give them a really good kind of sounding board and an opportunity to learn from some of the experts. So you can see here the top kind of stream is all about developing the business case, and we've already run some really well attended and really interesting sessions on developing AR use cases. And then lessons learned, we had Boeing, we had Koch Industries, and Newport News Shipbuilding talking about the work they've been doing. On the second one, it's all about overcoming the barriers. So we had a really interesting talk with some of the safety experts in AR, again from Boeing, Realware, and from Welsh Water. And then another group talking about change management and the importance of that when deploying the technology or delivering the technology. We had people from Medtronic and also a professor who had done some research for us about change management. And then finally, the third bit is all about bringing together kind of industry and technologies and talking about AR. So this is what this webinar sessions today. We'll be talking about AR in life sciences. There will be more of these to come, so please go to the area website, sign up to these different sessions. We really are here to try and help companies successfully deploy the technology. Next slide, please, Angelo. And just to say that we have a whole bunch of different webinars over the years, over 40 now, in all sorts of subject matter areas. So please go to the area website under the resources and look at the videos. The webinar archive has a real rich amount of different webinars on all sorts of different things. So please go and have a look there, or send me a note if you're interested in a particular area. So, and then I think the final slide from me. Next one, please, Angela. Oh no, just to say we have another webinar coming up on the 20th of May, which is looking at AR device, medical devices, and again with a couple of area members there as well. So please feel free to sign up, go to the area events page. Okay, now I know it's the last slide from me. So before I hand over to Angelo, just remind you that you can ask questions. Please use the tool. There's a questions tool within this GoToWebinar tool. Please type them in. I'll ask Angelo at the end of the session as well. So all I need to do, if you can go to the next slide, Angelo, please. Here we go. So I'm going to hand over to your good self. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll introduce yourself. And I'm super excited to sit back and listen to some of the great work that you and the team have been up to. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And thank you all for attending today. You know, this industry in life sciences, for those of you that aren't familiar, is a pretty remarkable one, even pre-COVID. But now throwing in and considering what this industry has accomplished in this last year, it's absolutely, truly remarkable. And this journey today that we're going to go through today's webinar is really meant to highlight a lot of the different things that not only was accomplished last year, but what is going on in this industry in general. Because even pre-COVID, life sciences, and when I talk about life sciences, I mean pharma, biotech, and now we'll even get into this new world of precision and personalized medicine, was going through some pretty major changes. And then when the pandemic came up just a year ago, and I have to say, and I have to emphasize just a year ago, because it really is unbelievably incredible what this industry has been able to accomplish in just a year. So today is really a story of kind of going through and not only talking about what's going on in this industry and where it's headed, but also to highlight a lot of different things that have happened in this last year and a lot of the different things that our customers have focused on. And you'll hear a number of different case studies, you'll hear a number of different success stories, and you'll really hopefully take away from this how this technology is starting to enable this next wave of therapies coming to market. Because for those folks that aren't familiar with life sciences, I'm going to be going through the different types of drugs that are being produced in this space and the new therapies coming to market to what we say here at Apprentice, not only help COVID, but to create a lasting impact from COVID to cancer. Because here we are in May of 2021, and for those of you that are listening here after May of 21, it's this whole pandemic, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, there's an incredible amount of hope and a incredible amount of optimism coming out of this year. And it's really just remarkable what life sciences and this whole industry has accomplished, and the specific men and women that we've worked shoulder to shoulder with over this last year to accomplish remarkable things. And so today I'm going to walk you through a number of these different topics, and I'm excited to share with you more about this industry and more about how they're leveraging this technology, because I really do believe that this industry is becoming incredibly forward thinking in how they've been adopting new technologies to solve these challenges that we're going to walk through today, but also too the level of ingenuity, creativity, and just overall cleverness that we've seen from our customers as they've raced to not only get this vaccine out to market, but more importantly, set the stage for what will come next. And a lot of it is around this new topic of cell and gene therapy, precision and personalized medicine. And so I'm excited to share a lot of this with you today, and thank you all for joining today's webinar. And we have a number of different topics, like I said, that we'll be talking through today. And so the first one is just to introduce folks to the industry itself. Most people, when they think of pharma, they may think of pills. They may think of things like Advil and Tylenol and Claritin, or even antibiotics. You get sick, you go to the doctor, and you get some pills later on to take care of whatever ailment that you may have. We're actually going to be talking through a lot of the different changes that have gone well beyond. They're classified as small molecule drugs, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But really just introducing everyone here in the webinar, what and how this industry works, how they manufacture things, and overall talking through the level of complexity associated with this industry to hopefully even take away from it a little bit more of an understanding about how and what is going on with the vaccine production right now. But then we're going to get into, because this is the area webinar, and I'm very excited to share how Apprentice has really leveraged this technology and how AR is really truly being leveraged right now to solve some really incredible challenges throughout this space. And this is at a personal level very exciting for me, because this is now our 7th year here at Apprentice. We founded the company back in 2014. And what we've seen this industry go through, and not in this case now, I'm not even referring to even life sciences anymore, but more so the evolution of AR and the evolution of how this technology is being adopted, and not just even adopted any longer in the sense of how people can use this technology, but this tech is now becoming core systems. We're talking full-blown systems of record that are using this for some of the most important, in our case, manufacturing on planet Earth. And to see this now, after all these years, finally coming to not only fruition, but to see it at the scale in which is a perfect segue to my next topic, it is really super exciting. And I think for those of you that are on the webinar today that have been in the industry for a long time now, I think all of us feel this momentum. I think all of us feel this excitement and enthusiasm. And frankly, I think it's because of a lot of us here on the call, and for those of you listening in that have been championing this technology for a really long time. And so then we'll get into that, what has been that rapid adoption here during COVID, because we've seen really tremendous growth in this last year. And then of course, we'll wrap it up with really some pretty cool use cases and success stories from our customers. And then of course, talk about where is this all going? Because I really do believe that this pandemic is going to be ending soon. Maybe it's because of our relationships with our customers and where they are in the process. But generally speaking, I really am hopeful and optimistic about this pandemic coming to an end. And it's just, I still can't believe that, this pandemic will end because of this industry, which I think is really just remarkable. So getting into it now and introducing everyone to life sciences, like I said, when most people think about pharma, they may think of pills and Advils and Tylenols and Claritins and the like. But this industry is really drastically changing. Even pre-pandemic, this industry was moving from small molecule drugs. Again, these are your oral solid dose type things. These are your Advils, your Tylenols, your Claritins, your antibiotics. These types of drugs have been produced, frankly, the same way since the 1800s. You take some active pharmaceutical ingredients, which are think of it as like your dry powders. You mix it together, you press it into a pill, and if you're lucky, you'll even coat it green, depending on what it is that you're producing. But that process is fairly well understood and fairly somewhat simplistic in its construction. Not to say that it is simple or easy by any stretch of the imagination. But in the last decade and a half has been the rise of biologics. These are your cancer drugs, your diabetes drugs, your Alzheimer's drugs, and the COVID vaccine, where these drugs are not mixed. These drugs are not pressed into pills. These drugs are grown, and they created from living cells, and these can be mammalian cells, CHO cells, many different types of starter cells, where for those of you that aren't familiar with life sciences, think of it like beer making. You have these giant stainless steel tanks, and if you go to our website, there's a video on our website homepage that Gives a little bit more of a better visual description of what and how these drugs are produced. But when these cells then multiply over time, they express a protein, which that protein is an antibody or a monoclonal antibody like you see on the screen, and that is the drug product. And this whole process is wildly different and wildly more complex than the initial small molecule manufacturing of old. And this is something where, let's take the COVID vaccine, for example, it takes anywhere from 3 to 4 months to produce one batch of drugs. In the early days of the commercial manufacturing, it was taking up to 110 days to manufacture one batch of drugs that's going out the door. And so if you think about that for a minute, the seriousness level, the requirements, the complexity, the overall just pressure is probably the best word to execute these batches reliably the first time, every time, and to do so with safety is incredibly important. Because if a batch is lost in our space, which there was news that came out a few weeks ago about some lost batches of the COVID vaccine, they can't just spin up a new manufacturing line, or they can't have some robots, come along and create a new car or something like this, or change a door. This isn't like a Tesla manufacturing facility, and not to say that Tesla isn't wildly complex and important as well. But the point being is that you lose a huge amount of time when you're going through this process if a mistake is made. And speaking of that time, we're now even moving towards this new world of personalized medicine through cell and gene therapy, where there's a specific batch of drugs made for me and a specific batch of drugs made for all of you on the call based on our actual white blood cells, based on our actual DNA in a sense. And so this whole manufacturing process now is on a per person basis, where the supply chain is literally from the hospital bed to the manufacturing facility and back. And this whole process, if biologics was already wildly complex, cell and gene therapy, personalized medicine, precision medicine, there's a lot of different names for it, is at the very next level. Because if you lose a batch, you're not just losing months of time or millions of dollars or speed to market, you're potentially losing a patient. And so with this radical shift in the industry, we believe that it hasn't coincided with a radical shift in the software to power the space. So that's why we started Apprentice, and that's why we really believe that through these emerging technologies, and AR really kind of sits at the heart of our solution, we really believe that they can usher in the next wave of these therapies coming to market. Because like I said, COVID is ending, and we are starting to turn our attention even here internally at Apprentice from this new concept that we call, creating a lasting impact from COVID to cancer. Because that's really where this world is going, and these new cell and gene therapies coming to market really demand a new technology to enable the level of manufacturing precision, the manufacturing reliability, the manufacturing safety of these drugs that are going out to billions of patients around the world. And so when we get into now, excuse me, what challenges does this industry actually face as they're manufacturing? Obviously, as I just mentioned, it is a wildly complex process. But more so than that, there are specific use cases and specific components that make the overall landscape a very challenging landscape, even before you layer in augmented reality into all of this. And so within this space, it's broken really, how we think about it at least, it's broken into two different buckets. Bucket one is really just around collaboration. I hate to trivialize it that much, and I'd hate to kind of break it down into such a simple component, but really this pandemic held up a mirror to this industry and effectively showed that a lot of the ways in which they were collaborating, a lot of the ways in which they were going through and doing certain things, that there may be other ways to go about this. And so the pandemic really, I think, forced the industry to take a different look at how different teams did different things. And a lot of those things are what you see here on the left-hand side around tech and method transfer, FAT, SAT, I'll explain what that is here in a second. But the takeaway is that when all of a sudden this entire industry went home, no different than any other industry around the world. But what's unique about this industry is that beyond the actual COVID vaccine that had to get produced, the world's global drug supply chain still had to stay open. And so this whole concept of tech and method transfer, for those of you that aren't familiar, literally when for several years, there are schedules put into place for how organizations move drugs throughout their pipeline. And what I mean by move drugs throughout their pipeline, it's different locations, different facilities, different countries have to then have and manufacture different drug products because of different things like capacity or regulatory requirements or market requirements. There's many different reasons why a molecule can be produced and manufactured in different places around the world. And so in order to actually do that, in order to move it from one location to another, there's a massive process called tech transfer, where in the past, folks used to literally pack up these huge suitcases, fly on over to where that site is, and effectively live out of that said suitcase for if not weeks, but multiple months, depending on the complexity of all this. So given that COVID kind of threw a massive wrench into the whole thing, we had to then still solve that with our customers because, like I said, these tech and method transfers were scheduled years in advance. But beyond just collaboration, which I think is a very obvious impact here of the whole COVID situation, we've been seeing a massive impact on the actual execution side of the world. This comes down to everything from the actual manufacturing process itself, related to the reliability of the process. There's a term in life sciences called deviations, which is in effect, for those of you that aren't familiar with the space, it's something was supposed to happen one way or be performed one way, but there was a different outcome, whether that was human error or the cells got out of a certain tolerance or whatever it is. This whole concept of deviations leads to lost batches. It leads to slower speed to market. It really is a massive, massive impact on this industry. And we saw these things spike tremendously throughout the summer months of last year. And it really just became incredibly difficult because this industry was effectively trying to solve COVID with COVID around them. And that in and of itself, I think, is just a massive challenge. And so this is where we've really focused in terms of what Apprentice it can really help and enable our customers achieve. And we've really taken an approach of introducing this new technology into this space to solve some of these key challenges that we're talking about here. And how we do all of that then is through something that we call augmented procedures and intelligent batch execution. This is what we believe to be very unique about Apprentice in the sense that we don't just focus on step-by-step procedures. I think there's a lot of different solutions in AR right now, and there's a lot of different approaches to all of it. But because of the challenges of life sciences specifically, we've been really, frankly, forced to build out a much broader, much more complex, much more intelligent and integrated system that can run the entire manufacturing process. And so just to explain that process again, we had talked a few slides ago about this movement from small molecule, which is pills, to large molecule, which are your biologics, which are your cancer drugs, your Alzheimer's drugs, your diabetes drugs, et cetera. And then even more towards now personalized medicine through cell and gene therapy. The whole orchestration of that process is incredibly important to ensure that materials are moved correctly, equipment is utilized appropriately, and that the actual process that's being executed on is done so in a way with high reliability and precision. And so our solution goes well beyond just kind of the simplistic step-by-step instructions and goes into this new world where it's a full-blown manufacturing execution system. And from end to end now, we have completely reimagined and re-envisioned what it even means to be a manufacturing execution system. And we've been able to incorporate augmented reality, voice, AI, ML, and some other really nifty stuff directly into this platform such that then it can enable and deliver on a lot of those aforementioned challenges that I mentioned that our customers are going through today. And so what makes this platform unique beyond just the breadth and depth of it is that it was specifically built and designed for these new modalities that are coming to market. These biologics and cell and gene therapy that are coming to market now really demand a new way of thinking about things, really demand a new way of using software to enable, and most importantly, increase speed to market. Because I think that if we learned one thing in the last year, that speed to market matters. It matters a lot. And so having a solution that's really built around that to enable these new therapies come to market has, of course, been super important. And we'll get into what happened with COVID here in a minute, but I just want to touch upon this because this whole system, we've had to be very purposeful with how we've designed, built, and implemented it because of just the sheer demands of this space. There's just the sheer demands of what our customers are using this software for has been really critical to the evolution and really critical to the success that we've seen. And of course, like I said earlier, we've deeply incorporated that into our collaboration tool as well. We call it Tandem, and we call it our language independent global collaboration tool because we've modeled the way in which manufacturing teams collaborate. I think for many of us here on the call, I'm sitting behind a computer screen right now. You know, I collaborate very differently than our customers do in the manufacturing suite or in the lab. And how they collaborate, how they go about that process is very unique to their workflows. And so what I mean by that is we couldn't just design a system that was like, hey, let's see what I see kind of a thing. We've had to build in very special tools. Our Smart Hub, for example, which you see here on the screen on the upper left-hand quadrant is an example of that. But we've had to really deeply extend the capabilities to deliver on the specific nuanced workflows that our customers are executing on a day in and day out basis. And those workflows, again, you see here on the screen, include everything from just day-to-day collaboration to CMO process collaboration, which is super interesting because this is how a lot of the different COVID vaccines have been produced, where yes, there are components that are being produced internally at the organizations that have developed and have approved vaccines on the market, but a lot of them are working with contract manufacturers as well because there just simply isn't or wasn't enough capacity on planet Earth for 8 billion people to receive this vaccine. And so the ways in which sponsor organizations work then with their CMOs and collaborate on these wildly complex processes, we've really seen this technology be used quite successfully to be able to enable and deliver on a lot of those different components. And so there's a number of different ways that we've seen our customers use this, which again, I'll get to in a moment when we get to our use case study. But the point is, and the takeaway is that combined with our intelligent batch execution in Tandem, this is a complete suite now of tools where then a manufacturing team within life sciences can not only execute reliably, but they can also collaborate effectively. And we really believe that to usher in the next wave of therapies coming to market, collaboration still needs to be at the heart of the process. It can't be necessarily a bolt-on. It really needs to be incorporated from the start. And that's why we've taken such steps like our Smart Hub on the upper left to be able to really extend the capabilities of this technology to make it incredibly useful and valuable for the teams that are leveraging our solution. And speaking of those teams that are leveraging our solution, last year was a really big moment for us. I really think not only a big moment for us, I really think a big moment for the industry, both at a life science level, but also at an AR level as well. Because everything that I think we had been building towards and fighting for all of those 7 years here at Apprentice just unbelievably exploded last year. And we saw a really high level of growth in 2020, where we had many customers, again, which I'll get to in our case studies here in a minute, but we had customers rapidly deploy this technology throughout both their internal sites and networks around the world, but also we saw it across the many new customers that came into Apprentice and the many new use cases, the many new deployments that we had seen in 2020 alone. And so one of the big takeaways was that it wasn't just concentrated to a specific geography. We saw deployments all around the world last year, not just in North America, which of course, we're a North American company, so of course we saw deployments here, but we were also really shocked by the level of deployments and speed of deployments in both Asia, Southeast Asia, which includes China, which was a really big challenge for us last year, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, India, and then throughout Europe. I mean, the number of countries we had deployed throughout Europe was remarkable. But even too, we then had new deployments come up in South America and Africa. And really, truly, this was at a global scale last year where this technology was finally being used to solve major problems, not just at an individual site or team level, but it was used to solve really big problems at scale. And I think that was the big turning point for Apprentice. I think it was a big turning point for AR. And because I think now the level of credibility that we've taken out of 2020 and taken out of these deployments at a massive scale, where again, across our entire customer base, we have on average 18 plus sites per customer now across everyone. We have customers up to 70 sites, 50 sites, 45 sites, and it's quite dramatic at the upper end of our scale. But the point being is that this technology really became a core system that our customers use to solve a lot of the key challenges that they had, not only last year, but now setting the stage for what's to come in 2021. And so speaking of that, that's really where then our impact during COVID then, like I said, got very high, because the principles of this technology and how it was ultimately implemented really then started to have the level of impact that I think we as a company had been fighting for so long, because life sciences then really had to solve a once in 100-year challenge, because never have we seen since really, if you go back to the Spanish flu, the level of breadth and depth and scope and impact of this pandemic, and to go and execute in the way that they did in the timeline, especially in the timeline that they did it in, was really just something that I think that here at Apprentice, we're both proud of our little, very small part in the whole thing, but also too, we're very proud of our customers in terms of how and what they did last year to solve some of these incredible challenges. Again, it wasn't just the COVID vaccine, it was really keeping the global drug supply chains open last year, because if they couldn't produce, many of the other drugs that are life-saving and really keeping so many people or depend on those drugs, if those drugs couldn't be produced and those drugs couldn't ship, then it really could have potentially been much worse, I think, for humanity last year at a much different scale than what we went through, which in and of itself has been, wildly depressing, upsetting, and everything associated with it. But I do think that the men and women in this industry that worked to the level that they did last year and continue to do so, because this fight is not over. We're coming towards the tail end of it, but it is not over, I think has been really powerful. And so now getting into some of the use cases that our customers have deployed on and spoken about and really leveraged to be able to use this technology successfully, and to do so again in the backdrop of this pandemic, where the challenges that our customers faced on their own teams, where their own teams were still at home, their own teams were dealing with COVID around them, and their own teams were forced to solve some of these incredible challenges while they were still going through challenges themselves at home, in their companies, and on their teams. And so the first case study that I want to share is about one of our customers. They're a top 5, well, they're top 5, but they're also a top 10 company out there. And they're currently deployed in over 70 sites around the world right now. And they have been really just unbelievable to not only work with, but to watch how they deployed this and how they matured this technology at both the rate and the scale in which they did, because pretty much overnight last year in March of 2020, this project went from just a few sites around the world that were operating fairly successfully to then being the critical system that this organization was using to solve their really key challenges and continue to solve said challenges throughout the last year. And so the speed of this deployment, really we were really proud of, because at Apprentice we developed this concept of a rapid deployment kit. And in the early days of the pandemic, we completely retooled our software, completely retooled how we deployed hardware, and we developed ways in which we could deploy remotely, train remotely, support remotely, set up remotely, configure remotely. And we did all of that in February of last year before the pandemic really hit. I think, quite frankly, we just got a little bit lucky about it. But once it then did get deployed at the speed and the breadth and the scale that it did, especially with this customer, they then got to then see and benefit the high value that this technology can provide. Again, everywhere from collaboration at a global scale to also reliable execution, which was a really key aspect of what I think they were trying to achieve last year. And so I'm incredibly proud of their team for how they learned from this technology and how they developed the processes, systems, people, etc., to be able to do this at the scale in which they did. And I'm proud of my team for how we were able to collaborate so deeply with this organization and really effectively become an extension of their team as they were trying to solve the challenges that they had last year. And so they continue to expand, and we're excited about our future journey with them to push into additional new use cases throughout their organization. But generally speaking, I think that they are an excellent marker for how this technology can be used and how this technology can be not just a great demo or not just a point-based use case, but how this can really become a critical system that this organization can rely on for some of the most important, in my opinion, some of the most important manufacturing that's going on planet Earth. We also then have another use case from Bristol Myers Squibb, one of our other customers, who also, just like the aforementioned customer, deployed at just an incredible clip and scale last year, and really drove the new way, we believe, the new way of going about both researching and manufacturing really, really critical therapies. Because BMS is incredibly unique and in a sense that they have this huge commercial scale across the different molecules that I spoke about at the top of the call. Not only are they exceptional in small molecule manufacturing and development, but with the acquisition via Celgene, they've also too are one of the absolute leaders in commercial manufacturing around CAR T, which is personalized medicine, cell and gene therapy manufacturing. And so BMS is really super unique in that regard, and we have a fantastic partnership with their teams, and the folks like Noble and others who we've been working with quite deeply over the years have really helped not only show how this technology can be used and leveraged successfully, but more than that, again, just like our prior customer, have deeply embedded this into the day-to-day workflow, the day-to-day process for how these organizations can leverage this technology and do so at a critical systems level, not just, again, as a nice to have, but truly a need to have system that has become the backbone of their process. And so we've been working with them for quite a while now, and they've used our system across many different use cases, teams, drug products, you name it. But they just released a public article about this and how during COVID, they really were able to leverage this technology in a way to continue operating successfully, again, in the backdrop of this unbelievable pandemic that they had. And so they worked through a number of different use cases throughout their organization, again, at a pretty remarkable scale, considering, again, a lot of them were started this pandemic at home. And how do you continue to execute reliably in suite or in the lab with all these different challenges going on around you, it really was then used to help their organization get through and really thrive during this pandemic. And so we've been really proud and humbled to be able to work with them, and their team over there at BMS has really been fantastic to work with. But I do believe really deeply that this year has caused a change, and when I say this year, 2020, has caused a major change in this industry and the way in which it looks at these new and emerging technologies. And that really then is a perfect segue into where is the future of all of this going? Because it's not just about 2020 any longer. It's not just about COVID. It's really truly about how this industry can continue to deliver on the future drugs that are coming to market, the future therapies that many of us will be relying on as again, a humanity scale type of challenge. But we really believe that where this is all going is deeply into cell and gene therapy and personalized medicine front. This is where we're focusing a huge amount of our energy and resources right now. As we speak, we're developing V6 of our platform, specifically around cell and gene therapy manufacturing to usher in the next wave of therapies coming to market. But the biggest piece of all of this is, again, this radical shift in the industry, going from one batch for many people, think of it like again, Tylenol is the easiest example to share, to now going to one batch for one patient. And that radical shift in the manufacturing process, that radical shift even in the way in which they think about deploying and where these facilities are located, how they're constructed, how the design of the process then impacts the timeline and reliability and ultimate success for the individual patient. All of that then goes through this just new way of thinking. And so we really believe that this technology will be the linchpin and one of the underlying core infrastructure technology components to really usher in this next wave of therapies coming to market, because the flexibility that this new way of manufacturing demands really requires a software and a tool set to really usher in that next wave. And so we're incredibly excited about what is going to happen in the next few years. We're already seeing the early and maybe not so early signs of all of that through a lot of our customers, that even some of the ones I just mentioned. And I'm really truly deeply excited about where this industry is headed and how then they've adopted this technology to be able to enable and ultimately deliver on some of the key challenges that they faced, not just last year, but now into the future. So with that, I appreciate it very much for you listening in here today in today's webinar. Thank you very much for attending. And please feel free, if you have any questions, please paste them into the chat. Otherwise, I hope that when we get on the other side of this thing, to see many of you and many of our colleagues here in person at a area event or another conference in which together we can hopefully see the area folks again, because it's been quite a while now, and I'm excited to see everyone in this industry, because I really do believe that what this industry has done at an AR and life science and just across the spectrum has been, I know I've said it a lot today, but it's been remarkable. And so I'm excited to see many of you, and I hope to see you at a live event soon. But thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please feel free. I'm happy to answer.
Angelo, that was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Really insightful. We do have a couple of questions, and I ask people, please feel free to type your questions. But I just wanted to ask one quick one at the start. As you well know, within the area, we kind of not only look about the benefits, but some of the barriers to adoption. I'm really interested in terms of that kind of stakeholder journey. Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of convince the stakeholders? It sounds like to me you'd already had a few little things going on with some of the companies and suddenly exploded, but maybe just your insights in terms of convincing stakeholders to invest in this technology at a time of great need. Hello, Angelo, can you hear me?
Sorry, I was muted, Mark. So absolutely happy to talk through that, because it quite frankly involves a little bit of luck. Because last year, I was supposed to fly out to China early on in the pandemic to one of our customers. This is before we even knew it was going to be a pandemic. This was even before we knew it was going to be a thing. And we had a quick glimpse at potentially, what the impact of all this may be. And so, like I mentioned during the presentation, we completely retooled all of our software and how we deploy, configure, train, support, you name it, in February of last year. And we started to prepare in early March then for how we believed, at least, this technology could be used. At that time, it was just really, frankly, a theory. We didn't exactly know, because I don't think anyone knew, the impact of this pandemic at the time. But what we started to prepare for was, we really had a pretty good feel and idea of what was immediately going to get impacted. And the biggest thing that we saw was tech transfers, because if you couldn't travel, these tech transfers still had to happen, and the dollar amount, the impact, the timeline, it's just huge. We're talking multi-million, multi-month, multi-everything would be impacted by tech and method transfers. So we did, not necessarily for the customers we already had relationships with, because the customers we already had relationships with, since they already were champions of this technology, they had the foresight and they had the vision. And there's all of that, many, many examples across our customer base where they just saw how this technology can help so much of what they needed to do last year. But for the new customers, the new folks coming online, people that had never put on a headset in their life, people that had never seen or heard of augmented reality, maybe outside of a YouTube video, how do we convince them? And how we convinced them was, we went after the most important and impactful use cases that were out there last year, which were those tech and method transfers, FAT, SAT, audits, inspections, tours. All those different things were the immediate lead-in to Apprentice. But that was just from like March until June-ish, because once the shock of COVID kind of wore off, then everyone started to realize that, hey, wait a second, my operations are being impacted. My day-to-day execution, my manufacturing process, we're seeing much higher deviations. Like, what is going on here? And that's when then the core of our platform, our intelligent batch execution, augmented procedures, really start to shine, because we're the only cloud-based MES. We're the only MES that has a level of flexibility built into the system. We're the only MES that has a level of augmented reality baked into it at the extent that we do, that's built and designed for life sciences. And so we were in a place in which, through the first part of the pandemic that was focused on, these remote transfers, these remote collaborations, through that, we then had the credibility, use cases, and customer success stories to then build upon heading into the summer months, to then really snowball this thing leading into the back half of 2020 and now into 2021. So I have to say, Mark, a little bit, quite frankly, was just a little bit of luck, but thrown in there, we really attacked what we believe to be the most critical and important need to have use cases, not nice to have stuff, like full blown, like your operations would be down if you do not adopt this technology type of use cases, because that then set the credibility for everything else that came after it.
No, thank you. It's really insightful. And you say a little bit of luck, but I think there's also a huge amount of insight and hard work. It's obviously gone in a short period of time to retool and stuff like that. So, congratulations. We have a couple of questions and that the attendees have typed in. So the first one, can you provide some context around GMP versus non-GMP related use cases listed on the advancing drug manufacturing slide? So I think it was relatively early. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, it does. And so within life sciences, again, for those folks on the call that aren't as familiar with life sciences, this is a highly, highly regulated space. And there are a number of different ways in which regulatory touches the processes in which our customers go about the execution of the drug making process. But it's broken down into two different segments, and I'm trivializing this for the folks on the call, but it's non-GMP and GMP, where GMP stands for good manufacturing practices. We often here in Apprentice extend that out to GXP, because We don't just participate in manufacturing processes, we also participate in laboratory processes, and we touch upon the automation piece as well. But the point being is that GMP use requires something called validation. And again, this is for the folks on the call that are not familiar with life sciences. But the validation process, if I were to simplify the whole thing, is there's a set of regulatory requirements that define how software is developed, how software is deployed, but probably most importantly, how software is tested and confirmed and validated in this space. And so that whole process, that whole flow, that whole challenge on how an organization goes through to qualify our software to be used within this manufacturing setting is fairly involved. And we actually work with a third party called Compliance Path. That third party works with us very deeply to validate our system independently. And also too, beyond the fact that they validate our system independently, they work with our customers to go through the validation process, because our customers have to perform a series of IQ, OQ, and PQ test scripts, for lack of a better term for our audience here, to go through and qualify our software. But because of all of that, we've had this very specific strategy for how this technology is deployed, because there's a bit of a longer tail on the GMP side of the use cases versus non-GMP side. For the non-GMP side, because our system was specifically designed to what we call decrease time to value, i.e., how fast can you get this thing actually stood up, and how can our software actually move an organization from paper to digital very quickly. And we didn't touch upon some of that in today's call due to the audience and the focus of the webinar. But the point is, for non-GMP use cases and non-GMP deployments, we can get set up incredibly quickly. And that speaks to how we retooled our software, retooled our processes, retooled all of our training last year in 2020. But then on the GMP side, like I said, we work with a third party to specifically give us the level of velocity that our customers and even ourselves look for to move an organization into GMP readiness to actually use this in a validated state. And so that's how then we go through and actually execute on this and move AR into that GMP world to then actually be leveraged and deployed in some of the most critical physical aspects and processes that our customers have.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So just a quick follow on from that. Thank you. Could you quickly provide examples of use cases that are non-GMP?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a huge number of non-GMP use cases. So part of our intelligent batch execution part, we have a lot built in around equipment management, material management, and a lot of those things can happen external to the GMP process. In addition to that, we also have a huge number of use cases around training, which are very easy, low-hanging fruits, and ones in which our customers can get started with immediately, because what we've done is we take and maybe this is now where I'll touch upon how we do all of this. So we take an organization's existing paper content, and what I mean by paper content is the batch records, SOPs, training procedures, you name it, and we take those documents and we augment those documents and we extract the content from those documents and we convert them into what we call augmented procedures, where then those augmented procedures then can be really leveraged quite deeply for non-GMP use cases like training. Because what we've found within life sciences, and this is a really important takeaway for apprentice, was that it's not just about what to do, i.e. the instruction, i.e. the process definition, but it's also equally as important to know how to do something. So the technique associated with what to do is as super important as, well, the how to do is as important as the what to do. And so we layer in augmented reality quite deeply to provide just-in-time training, to provide just-in-time technique media. But beyond all of that, the overall training use case is a perfect non-GMP place to get started, because the impact there on the subsequent GMP process is quite high, and it's then a natural evolution and segue once the system is validated to move into the full-blown GMP space.
Perfect. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to ask this next question, but I think it's a pretty generic one. But I'll try you, Angelo, and then with you, I can certainly make a comment. But the question is, would AR affect or impact the eyes in any way similar to how screens affect your eyes now?
So we have taken I'm going to joke and say a fairly controversial approach to AR, in the sense that I don't fully believe that we should have spinny, floaty 3D stuff in front of your face at all times. And that's like, whoa, that is a very controversial topic coming from the CEO of an augmented reality company. But I'm actually serious about this. So what we've found when it comes to AR is that the display tech of it, just to putting it in front of your face bit, is only marginal benefit. We believe that the contextualization of the spatial mesh, the contextualization of what AR can provide, is truly where the value is. And so we've relied very deeply on voice, and we actually don't, again, controversial topic, we don't want you looking at the screen. Whoa, what does that mean? So what I mean by that is we've designed our software in such a way in which we want the software to be, and now this is going to sound a little kitschy too, but to be like an apprentice. Get it? That's where the name of the company comes from. But point being is that we want it to be there, but we don't want it to be in the way. So we actually don't want you looking at the screen at all times. We want you to glance at the screen only when you either require a bit of information or only when you forget a voice command. And so it's something that is very different in how we've approached AR. We just fundamentally believe that safety concerns, that occlusion and obstruction just really can slow someone down and slow down the actual deployment and success of these use cases that we just talked about, especially due to the criticality of some of these use cases. So in our opinion, again, this is a controversial thing for a CEO of an AR company to say, is we don't actually want you looking at the screen too much. We use AR in very different ways, whether it's on mobile, whether it's via very purposeful use cases, and thereby you're not then forced to look at this screen all day long and create eye strain or any of the above. So it's a very interesting learning that we've taken away, and something that I think has been, quite frankly, one of the underpinnings of our success, because we have been fairly honest with ourselves about how this technology can be deployed right now and the realities of what it's available to do today. So yeah, so actually was a very interesting question, I have to say. So thank you, whoever asked that.
No, thank you. And I kind of only echo what you say. Whilst we're all in the AR industry and we have CEOs and people working for AR companies, really we're about solving business problems.
Yep.
And that's exactly what you've spoken right the way through this. It's about solving real kind of challenges, be it, getting drugs quicker, getting them to different people, whatever the kind of challenge is. So, I echo and kind of almost reach out to the rest of the ecosystem that we should be talking about solving real business challenges, and however that needs to be done is the right way to do it. So I think it's a great kind of comment to finish the whole session on. Angelo, I can't thank you enough for some fantastic insights. I know little of the industry, but I'm certainly more informed now. I hope the attendees are. The recording will be made available on the area website and on the Apprentice website. And please feel free to follow up either with myself or with the Apprentice team. And again, just thank you for very insightful, and congratulations. And whilst I hope COVID finishes soon, let's continue to see the acceleration of these drugs and solving more problems around the world. So thanks again, Angelo. Thanks everybody for listening, and speak to you again all soon.
Thanks again. Thanks everyone. Stay safe out there. Hopefully see you soon.
Bye. Cheers, bye.